Hey everyone, it's Mario. Welcome to another episode of the We the Trust podcast. In every episode, Eric Chang and myself discuss living a life of overflow in each of our 5 pillars: spiritual, emotional, mental, physical, and financial. Join us as we train to be better at being the men God designed us to be. Better images of Christ, better husbands, better fathers, businessmen, and leaders. Our hope is that these conversations challenge you to desire the life that God meant for you when He designed you. So tune in, take notes, and connect with us as we enter the fray of manhood.
Hey guys, welcome back to a new season of the We the Trust podcast.
That's it.
Sorry,
We the Trust. Let's go.
I'm on 3 podcasts, so I said I was going to say finding reason. All right, let me reset. This is it. We're going.
I don't know why he does
after.
all this film. I leave it in anyway. So
you leave it in? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. You leave it in anyway? Do you really?
Most of the time, yeah, because it's just good.
All right. Well, all right. Hey guys, welcome back to another season of We the Trust. We're kicking off season 4, and we are really, really excited because we're talking about radical transparency. Today we have a very special guest. And between me and Mario, I'm going to say we missed doing this. I know for me, I've been anticipating this for months. So it's really, really good to be back. But we have a special guest with us today. I'll give some background as to how we know each other. We met through a Bible study through the Wealthy Kingdom, kind of Wealthy Way Network. It's been a blessing to me. Normally on Thursdays, I've been starting my Thursdays with the Bible study with Phil and a few other guys, but it's been... today is also Thursday. It's kind of nice to do this. So Phil VanHorn is a missionary to men and a co-author of Cracking the Man Code about biblical masculinity. Phil is an Emmy Award-winning journalist and a former network Espn, Turner, CNN sportscaster. Phil is a popular retreat speaker and leads a weekly discipleship group and quarterly large men's scale ministry events. He and his wife of 37 years, I'm going to butcher it, Lecia live in Los Angeles, where I live, which is really, really awesome. We were just talking about that earlier. He's about 40 minutes away from me. So welcome, Phil.
Thanks, guys. Pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. The first question we like to just ask people, is who are you? I kind of give you a little intro, but in your words, who are you?
I'm Lecia's husband.
There you go.
That's the simplest way. I'm a Jesus follower. I'm Lecia's husband, and I'm a guy that trying to figure it out, just like everybody else there.
Love that, Phil. Hey, Phil. So I would love to hear your journey of faith, of marriage. Since we're talking about marriage, right? I'd love to hear that story. That how you guys met, and when I say you guys, I mean talking about you and Jesus and you and Lecia. I would love to just kind of get into that and hear a little bit more background about Phil the man.
Yeah, sure. Lecia and I met. Good story. We'll talk about faith first. So my journey of faith is that it's a journey. When I was in my 20s, I was half in all the time, or all the time I was half in, and then that didn't work too well. And then in my early 30s, I said, "Okay, I'm going to go all in," not knowing at all what that meant. I didn't grow up in a home with church and Bible and that kind of thing, and so at that point, I was 90% in, and then I stumbled upon, and as often is the case, when I take a step, God takes a God-sized step, and he connected me with a couple of guys that mentored me. We got into a Bible-based church, the pastor there, and then I met a guy who is often considered one of the leading authorities on ministering to men around the world, a guy named Pete McKenzie. He mentored me, and then I realized I've got to be all in, all the time, no matter what, and that's a challenge. But that's what we've done. It's been a progression, and even when things go bad, my wife and we decided we are all in. Now, I referenced Lecia. We met in Atlanta when she had just graduated college. She grew up, born and raised in LA. I'm a Midwestern guy, Indiana. We met both working at CNN in Atlanta a long time ago, about 40 years ago now, very early days of CNN when it really was a journalistic enterprise. And she went to work, graduated USC, went to work right away. We met right away. I fell in love with her right away. That really happened. And in about 4 months, we were engaged. 2 years later, we were married. My best friend, love her dearly, respect her and love her more now than when we met. And very grateful to have shared the journey of 37 years of marriage and almost 40 years together, soon, almost 40 years together with her. I love the topic you have, radical transparency. I think my wife and I decided early on that we were just going to be honest with each other about the good, bad, and indifferent, because we both grew up in homes where we had both our parents, but one of our parents was not doing things right. My father was physically abusive, horribly abusive, and my late father-in-law likewise had some challenges with physical abuse. And we just decided our marriage is not going to be like that. Our family's not going to be like that. Our home will not be like that. And so I like this topic. I got excited when Eric said, we're going to talk about radical transparency. Mario, I have officiated a couple of weddings, and whenever I do one, it's going to be a believer wedding, and we're going to do Christian premarital counseling. And also, I tell them the moment I agree to do this, and if I'm going to do this, you got to stop sleeping together. So we pretty much say you got to read the Bible and do what it says. and that is radical these days.
Right? That's crazy radical.
Oh.
So I love that you guys were quick to fall in love, but you still kind of took a little bit of time on the back end with your kind of courtship, and you took about 2 years to get married. Who was instrumental in that time in your life? As far as you mentioned Pete, was he still a part of your life at that moment? Was he still kind of mentoring you? Who was walking you through that time?
Only by the grace of God. Lecia and I'll give her credit for having the wisdom to say, let's slow down and take our time. I was crazy in love with her, and she could have said, jump on your head upside down, and I would have done it. And I still love her dearly in many ways like that. But we decided early on, okay, we were in the network news business at that time, and it didn't pay well. It was a good job, but it didn't pay well. And we knew that we were in for a journey with regard to our careers, that we were probably going to have to move around. So that made us go slow. It did. And I'll give my wife credit for that. She had some wisdom about what she wanted our relationship to be. And I could tell that there were special qualities in her about her faith and what I aspired to do faith-wise, that we were going to sit down, talk about this at length, do some really basic things, respect each other, be polite to each other. And so that was really the foundation. And we would read the Bible, but we weren't really skilled at understanding it. We were totally in process. When we first met, and even when we were getting married and all, we were attending a church, but and it was a Bible-based church, but the pastor wasn't really explaining scripture to us. And I'm not blaming that on him. It's just, it didn't make a lot of sense at that point.
Yeah.
Like today, like a mature believer or someone who's read the Bible several times. But what we knew is we were going to do some basic things. We were just going to, even though we'd make mistakes, we'd keep coming back to, all right, God. And she'd say, I don't think we made a good decision, which was to say that I didn't. She was full of grace. And that was one of the strengths that she showed early on that made a real difference in our marriage, is that we both decided we wanted to do the right thing according to what the Bible says, even though we really didn't understand the Bible at that time the way we do now. And we both wanted to be kind to each other no matter what. And she was way better at me at just giving me grace early on as I stumbled through my career, as I stumbled through marriage, as I stumbled through life.
It's awesome.
Do you have any particular stories that like kind of are like pinnacle stories that define? I mean, I know that you've been married for 37 years, so there's so many experiences wrapped up. I mean, I've only been married for 11, been with my wife for 19 years though, like dating. But I mean, I'm sure I've been alive as 1 year less than you've been married. so, so, so like, I'm sure you have so many experiences wrapped up in, um, and so I'm sure there's so many stories about what grace has looked like in your marriage.
But
Um,
sure. So, guys, I mean, as soon as you brought that up, Eric, my mind is racing to my failures. Now, guys, I've worked in the entertainment industry for a long time, or in television, and I live here in LA. I've worked in Hollywood for 25 years. I have failed a lot professionally. I mean, and a couple of times really big, really. And it's a measure that if you're still in the industry, you will have failed big a lot. And I didn't get that early on. I was totally naive to the industry with some talent, which is a dangerous mix because you'll be taken advantage of. And I was. Um, and most of the really big failures, my wife was like, okay, good, pick yourself up. You need a little bit of time. Everything's fine. And really only once did she say, geez, are you going to do this repeatedly? Are you going to continue to make mistakes? And if I wasn't so defeated when that one time happened, I probably would say, yeah, I probably will. I think of the grace that she has given me. The people outside the industry will say, wow, you've had really big failures. That's terrible. And I say, well, if you're in the industry, you're going to have bad things happen. That's just the way it is. You got to learn to be resilient. Now, being resilient in life overall, as a as a guy, as a husband, as a father, as a son, as a coworker, is a really good skill to have. And I learned that from getting my butt kicked regularly in the media business, having great
Sure.
success and great failure.
Yep, for sure. I mean, I know I know a small bit of that. I mean, I worked in LA for a good many years. I'm a designer, a graphic designer. I do media and video, and I've been behind the camera, I've been in front of the camera. In that time there, and also over here, I have an inkling. I understand what you're saying. You know, the failures are going to come. Failures are going to be big. And the fact that you're still doing it means your failures didn't wipe you out, and you kept going. And what I hear, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I hear is that Lecia's support and her prodding and her love was really instrumental in allowing you to get through those failures and to a place where God's calling you to be.
You know what, Mario? I think you just said it better than I could. Uh, Guys, when I do premarital counseling, I start with a joke. And I repeat this often, is the key to marriage is for the wife to have, the wife's thinking he's up here, and I say, put him way down here. Low expectation is the key to marriage. And my wife has always had high expectations for me. But when I stumble, she has just been full of grace. And the more I mature, the more I appreciate and respect her for that. She had the maturity. And I'm sure someone around here was saying, hey, get rid of this guy. Go get someone else. You got stuff going on, girl. Get rid of this dude and find another one. And that just was never in her heart or in her mind. And we talked about that from the beginning, not knowing how painful or how difficult the journey would be. Life is a challenge these days. Culture is a challenge these days. Raising kids and all of this. Oh my gosh, Eric. You know, staying married this long is a challenge. Being married to my wife is not a challenge at all. Yeah, I'm so grateful to God. What a blessing. Being married to her is not a challenge at all. And it's mostly because very early on, she was full of grace. And then I just don't think I could love her or respect her anymore. And each year I find a new way to respect her as a woman, as a Christian woman, and as an individual, not just my wife.
Love that.
I know you talked a little bit about early on, like the recipe, the secret to the recipe in your marriage has been honesty from the very beginning. How would you define radical transparency in marriage?
Yeah. The first thought should be, I'm going to tell the truth even when it hurts. And the second thought should be, I shouldn't be doing things that I would not want to say, and I should avoid the things that I would not want to say or be totally honest about. Today, guys, we live in a, uh, a highly sexual culture, right? I mean, the numbers on porn for men and women and
Mm.
people inside church are dramatic. About 70% guys have some kind of regular porn consumption in and out of church. And guys in church and out of church are about the same. That means the guys in church aren't reading the Bible and doing what it says. And for gals, it's almost the same, close to the guys now. It's in the mid 60s of women inside and outside church who are consuming some form of porn. This generation of women, the past 10 years, the first generation of women ever, the porn industry has always targeted and marketed to women. This is the first generation of women that have received that, and it's been effective too.
Mm.
Now, I'll say this, Father, help me. That is not the problem for my wife and me. So I've never had that. And most guys, and as you said, Eric, I work retreats and events for men. And if I'm sitting in a group of 8 guys, 6 of them, almost like clockwork, 6 of the 8 are going to say they have some kind of, and I'm going to be understated here, deviant, and that's an understatement, challenge with sex, or they've had long-term porn consumption that started when they were 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. We're learning now that women are doing the same thing. Now, Lecia and I both said early on, we've had enough of other men and women. We're in this together. And she was so kind to me when I screwed up royally or had big career failure early on. I was beholden to her. Dear, I will never leave you. I will never date someone else. I will not do those things. So radical transparency in that regard, which is a big deal in culture now, that's not one of the things that was a challenge for us. We're not jealous people by nature. We were not early on when we started dating. And then we just made a real common sense Midwestern decision of, hey, let's start dating each other and let's step back from dating anybody else. And that really never changed. And when she said, hey, I'm giving you my heart, I said, oh, I've got a responsibility here. When I do premarital Christian counseling, I have 2 tricks that I always say to the husband or the fiancés, the bride and groom, said, one to the guy, you're going to give her a gift after these sessions are over. And I say to the bride, you're going to give him a gift. For the gals, I say, go find your earliest baby picture and get it blown up 8.5 by 11 and put it in a nice frame. You're going to put that on his desk. But wrap it up, and you're going to give it to him at the end of these counseling sessions. For the guys, I say, you're going to go read Every Man's Battle. And if you guys are familiar with Every Man's Battle or the series of books, they've sold millions. They're in like 30 languages around the world. And I say, in fact, you're going to read that in 3 weeks. So set aside your weekends, get rid of whatever consumes your time. You're going to give her the gift of having read that. And we're going to discuss that. Because key in the first book, Every Man's Battle, and in the follow-up to that, it's called Battle on, Battle Over. every man's battle is bounce the eyes. That doesn't mean we don't see, men or women don't see what's going on. It's just we don't absorb it. We look at it, we move on.
Yeah.
And I have the guy explain to her. And then when she hands him the baby picture, I say, she's not giving you a picture of her. She's giving you a picture of God's daughter.
Mm.
You go, oh, well, I kind of had that vision of my wife from the beginning, that she was precious and God's daughter. And I needed to be careful because I was often careless and sometimes still am. But I was careless with relationships. But as soon as she said, I'm giving you my heart, and we started working toward marriage, and then even though we were engaged, we did slow down. I started looking at her differently and saying, wait a minute, there's something about her I really need to respect in many ways. And in fellas, I tried to walk that out, even when I made big mistakes. If I made a mistake, I was truly sorry. I didn't just say, I'm going to walk away from this. And I think radical transparency in marriage starts with some foundation of, I hope it starts with some shred of faith. Because that's really what we had, was just an idea of we wanted to be a Jesus follower. We really didn't know what was going on. We weren't reading the Bible regularly, although we were reading it. We were going to church, but we really didn't understand. We were seekers when we met. We had an idea of that should be part of what we were about. And then being truthful with each other. We're just saying, look, we got to know each other's background. And we were going to just say mostly the truth and not hurt each other. Now, those are two different things. You can mostly say the truth to each other, and then, but I never wanted to hurt her. And I think those three things early on. We were seekers. We didn't want to hurt each other. And we were mostly truthful with each other early on. Not that we were hiding anything. Those things allowed us to say, all right, God, please help us grow together. And then as kids came along and we were parents, we talk about what kind of parents do we want to be? And then what kind of relationship do we want to have with each other and our careers and these kids? And it allowed us to go ahead and communicate regularly about, what kind of marriage we want to have. And it just said, let's tell the truth. Radical transparency has been a part of it. And Eric, I got excited when you told me about the topic, because that's something that my wife and I intentionally, yet never really labeled, pretty much from the beginning, and still practice today. She's my best friend. We spend a lot of time together. I wouldn't have it any other way.
What are some of the things that, and I love that story, and I love that you, one thing that I tell guys all the time, I do a lot of mentoring, discipleship, and one thing I tell the guys all the time is, wherever the relationship is where you let it, right? So it doesn't matter if you don't feel like you're leading, you're leading, and the state of that relationship is where you've taken it, and so and so I love the fact that early on you just decided, we're going to tell the truth, and we're going to do our best not to hurt each other, and we're gonna be seekers of God. We're gonna be seekers of Jesus. And I love that God took that seed of commitment and helped you become faithful in it, right? Which is that's just, I think that's a really special part of your story. And you alluded to it earlier. It's like, today's a very, very different day than when you guys started dating, right? And obviously LA is a very different place than where you started dating, even today. And so I'm just curious, as you mentor, as you disciple, as you walk men through premarital, what would be, some of those key pieces of, not necessarily advice, but tangible, tangible pieces of counsel that they can take with them and say, hey, when this happens, I need to remember this, or what does that look like for you when you're ministering to men?
Yeah. Well, so usually the guys are the one who say to their fiance, "Hey, I want Phil to officiate." And I start really early on with the bride and say, "So what do you see in this guy?" And they'll say something like, "Well, I see something different in him from other guys I've dated, or from the guys that my posse dates. There's something different about him." And I'll say, "Write that down. Hold on to that for a second." I said, "Now let's open the Bible." I say, there's this thing, if you understand it, I want a Proverbs 31 woman, right? A woman of wisdom who's industrious and puts her family first and God first and husband first. And a lot of guys say, I want a Proverbs 31 woman, but they forget it. And we'll read that. And I'll say, this is good. Then I'll say, but how about what does the Bible say about guys? And they go, nothing really. I said, well, actually, a lot. Let's go to Ephesians. You need to be an Ephesians guy. There's a lot of instruction there. And we read that out loud, and we'll read, different translations. And I'll say, okay, I'll say to the gal, I'll say, so the word submit is in there. And I go right to the gal and I'll say, the word submit is in there. I said, now think of your 3 best friends that are going to stand up there with you, your girlfriends. And if they were here right now and I said to them, they need to submit to their boyfriends, how would they react? Guys, it's 100%. They nearly spew. They're like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? They wouldn't do that for a second. And I said, you're right. That's very common. And I said, and if they knew that you're about to submit to him, what would they oh no, you're not submitting to anybody. I say, okay, good. Write that down. Hold on to that thought. Now I go to the guy and I say, what does the Bible say about submission to the guy? And the guys, they'll almost always say, well, I'm submitting to Jesus. And then I turn to her and I say, so what does that mean? And they're like, oh, I'm not sure. And I said, well, that means he will die for you. And they go, oh. And I said, now, if you were to tell your girlfriends that their boyfriends would say they would die for them in submission, how would they react to that? And they'd say, oh, their boyfriends would never do that, but they would be amazed. And I said, well, that's the guy you're marrying. He will do that for you. So you submit to him, he submits to Christ. And by submitting to Christ, he's letting go of a lot of him. No perfection here, but he's letting go of a lot of him. And I always say to her, and if he doesn't, call me and I will be on him about how to behave. So we set a foundation of what does the Bible say? And there is no perfection. I am certainly not perfect. And my wife's in the other room. She would say, my husband, not a perfect guy. And so that's what we get right away. Here's the foundation. Let's build on that. Let's get to know each other a little bit. Let's know what the Bible says. And we'll do 3 hour-and-a-half sessions. We'll read the Bible. And I give homework. And then there's a point at which I say, okay, we're exiting premarital counseling, mostly with a lot of what you brought in. But hopefully this has given you something to think about and integrate into your relationship. And the gals will almost always say, I think I have a better understanding now. Remember when you asked me that thing about, I know there's something special about my fiance that I'm not seeing in other guys, or made me choose him over others. Say, I think I'm seeing that. That's some of that God stuff, right? I'll say, yeah, I think it is. And I said, he's not perfect, but he's endeavoring to read the Bible and do what it says and take good care of you. And they'll say, and they'll say something like, yeah, a couple of gals notice that and they don't understand it, but they want a boyfriend like I'm getting. And that is why I'm marrying him. And I said, well, that starts with him. Remember, that starts with him. He's got to read the word. He's got to do it even when he doesn't want to. And he's committing to following Jesus and serving you. That's a lot to think about for a young couple getting ready to get married if they have no Bible background. And usually that's the case in culture today.
Yeah, for sure. Eric, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I keep thinking about as you've been sharing is how like I'm curious what led you to have like this person that you are that believes what you believe, that um that leads in the way that you lead and guides, like, that guides people in this direction. Like, what's the story of how you got there? Like, how, like, I'm sure you weren't born this way, right? So how did you what are some stories? I want to hear some stories about how you got there. Like, got to hear, I guess.
Ooh, ooh. Probably a good thing my wife is not with me here right now. uh, Trial and error, my brother. Trial and error would be the answer to that. Um, Eric, that's a great question. Wanting to do something better. Uh, so, you guys, I wrote this book, Cracking the Man Code, which is almost always within arm's reach.
Love it.
Available on Amazon.
There we go.
I'll link
And
to it.
and people say, okay, what's the man code? Yeah, I say it's about biblical masculinity. It's the journey of a man. Eric is part of your answer. The journey of me, from who I was to who I am, which was, I was, my man code started with, I was born into a family with two parents, three siblings. And fortunately, my mother had six brothers, and each of those guys would be described as the everyday good neighbor. And so I'd look at them. Now, my father was had a fifth grade education. He had a skill. He's an electrician. He was angry and violently abusive. My mother was very kind, generous, and a great athlete. That's the start of my journey. I was an abused kid. From about age 3 to 17, my father did some kind of physical abuse, mostly every month of my life. He had a bad day or got a speeding ticket. I got it that night. And some of it was really violent and really bad. So I came out of that and said, I was the youngest of the kids, so I was the one around when everybody else moved out. I got it a lot. I came out of that and I was two people. I was the public face of, oh, everything's okay. And I was the private face. I was really hurting. But I knew that I never wanted to see, when I date a girl or something like that, I never wanted to see that happen. So, Eric, a lot of me, trial and error, was still looking back at that violent abuse that I suffered as a kid. I wanted nothing to do with that. There has to be a better way in life. My father was never full of grace. And when I learned what grace was, I wanted to receive it and give it easily. I wanted to share that. So as I got into young adulthood, married with two kids, I started seeing my failures very plainly. They were easy to see. I think most guys could say, "Yep, I see what's happening." When I had success career-wise, that was wonderful. I was feted. When I failed, I knew I failed. And the same thing as a husband and as a father. My successes and failures were obvious to me. And from the failures, I just said, God, I want to do better. I start over again. And then it was, but I don't have the answers. I thought I did. Just don't be abusive. No, that's not an answer. And it's okay, I've got to figure out this relationship with God. I became a seeker. The good thing about that, of not having grown up around church, Bible, things like that, is it made it really easy for me, almost innocently or naively, to say, give me a little bit of Bible wisdom, I'll do that. Give me a little bit of Bible wisdom, about parenting or being married, you know. And then I started reading over John. The book of John's my favorite part of the Bible. And then I started being around guys, and it made it really easy for me to look at an adult guy and say, this guy's trying to do the right thing as a friend, husband, father, coworker, and this guy's not. I mean, I worked in the entertainment industry. It was not a fine line. I said, I want to be more of this guy. Even when I make big mistakes, I want to be more of that guy that's a better husband and father and coworker. And how that relates to the man code is a lot of times as we grow through life, you know, Eric Mario, we look around and we say, I want to be more like that guy. And occasionally we choose a guy that sort of is a Christian, but they really
Mhm.
don't read the Bible or go to church or do that stuff, and they really don't reflect the true nature of Christ. And that's confusing to guys. I followed someone, he's a mentor. What in the world is that about? So we have this man code we're born into. We grow and we kind of have our ups and downs, our success and failure. And for me, what that meant is I've got to go grow closer to Christ. Now, guys, I'm going to tie together a couple things about marriage and about my journey here. So I'm going to make a triangle. And if someone's listening to this, I'm making a triangle with my fingers. There we go. That's a triangle. And over here is me, and over here is my wife, and up here at the top is Jesus. Have you guys seen this illustration before?
Mhm.
Yeah. So the closer I grow to Jesus, the closer I get to my wife. I saw that early on. That made perfect sense to me. And then I heard a guy say, Jesus is looking for availability, not capability. Well,
Oh,
I was available. I wanted to be a better husband and father and, believer, but I didn't have fancy Bible knowledge or flowery prayer. That's not me. And so when someone said, Jesus prefers capability over or availability over capability, I was all in. It's like, okay, I'm going to go back and read the book of John again. That's my favorite part of the Bible. And things started making more sense. Now, when the Bible starts making more sense, that is not that perfection in life is about happen. In fact, oftentimes the closer we grow to Jesus, the more that, occasionally really, really bad things will happen. And that's my story as a believer. In our family, we've had, or in friends and family around me, I've had about 8 suicides.
Mm.
That's a lot. It's painful. 2 nephews, really, really difficult. But each time when we walk through that, people would look at my wife and me and say, "Hey, can you pray?" I say, "Sure, I'll pray." I was unafraid to pray or step into darkness and pray. And so, Eric, is trial and error. When bad things happen, I didn't step aside from Jesus. I stepped into Jesus. And I became accustomed to really bad stuff happening in life. My fault. I would make big mistakes, and I became accustomed to really harsh things in life happening. And I said, no matter what, and my wife and we did this together. We said, no matter what, we're standing by Jesus. We're standing on faith. And our fellas recently, and I think Eric, I think I told you this, Mario, 3 years ago, almost to the week, I
Mm.
woke up and lost vision in my left eye.
Oh, wow.
Had 6 surgeries, and I have monocular vision today. I had to learn to walk, run, and drive all over again,
Wow.
and think in some regards. And my wife and I kind of looked at that and said, "Okay, we're going to stick together, and we'll just see what happens." Monocular vision later in life creates a wide variety of challenges for people. And so, well, whatever the Lord has, I'm in. It oftentimes, Eric, to conclude my answer to your question, it oftentimes opens conversations for me with other people who have really difficult things.
Mm.
You want to talk about death? Let's go ahead. I'll listen and I'll pray with you, but I'm not going to fix you. I don't want to fix you. You don't want me to fix you. I'm going to say, let's pray together, but you keep taking that to the Lord. Don't come to me and say, Phil, fix me. So it's been a journey and trial and error. And no matter what, when really bad stuff or really good things happen, let's say, okay, Lord, let's wake up and do this again, one day at a time. Fellas, literally yesterday was not a good day in life overall. I received some really challenging news. And at the end of the day, I said to my wife, let's go to bed early tonight. We'll start again tomorrow.
Love it. Love that, Phil. Thank you for your story, man. I love that. You're just you're an inspiration and uh, a beacon, I think, for men today. And it's obvious to see that, why you do discipleship and why you are so active in men's lives, because men are looking like, I see it all the time. Obviously, like I'm aspiring to be more like Jesus daily. And I look behind me, and there's guys kind of looking at me and trying to model their lives, not in a hubris way, but just like looking at me because I'm slightly before them. I'm in front of them a little bit, and I'm trying my best to follow Jesus and do what the Bible says, and teaching them how imperfect I am and how perfect He is, right? And so thank you for being slightly ahead of us, Eric and I, and keeping on, with that pursuit of Jesus. It's just that, I think, is as radical as you can get today, right? Seeking and following Jesus. It started very radically when He was on earth, and it's still probably one of the most radical things you can do in life. But I appreciate your story. I appreciate your journey right now, and I appreciate your open, honest answers to everything, and just saying, you're not perfect. You're not, but He is, and you and your wife are holding hands and seeking Him together, and I think that's a beautiful and wonderful thing to aspire to for us, definitely, but also for anybody listening. It's great.
Thank you, Mario. Eric, I got to go back and watch this because no one has really asked me the question the way that you did. Now, guys, I'm a very common person. And Mario, what you just said, Jesus has been doing uncommon things with common guys for a long time.
Absolutely.
The original disciples were really common guys. Yeah. They were not the Pharisees. They were not the elite, the wealthy. And Jesus is still doing uncommon things with uncommon guys. And that is part of the man code. That's part of biblical masculinity. And biblical masculinity is not toxic. It's not. And the idea that it is wrong. Now, there is masculinity that is way out of hand, and it is wrong. I understand that. But biblical masculinity, serving your wife, following Jesus, that's not toxic.
Thanks for joining us today, guys. For more content, you can find us on Instagram at WeTheTrust or at WeTheTrust.com. If you'd like to connect further with Eric, you can find him on Instagram at Coach Eric Freedom. And if you'd like to connect further with me, Mario, you can find me on Instagram at the Mario Quesada. We'll see you next time.